How are you guys doing today? Today I'll be talking to you guys about the killing of Daniel Prude at the hands of the Rochester Police Department and the subsequent cover-up. This is Against Wordy. This is Extreme Foolishness TV. This is where I talk about extreme foolishness that goes on around you. Daniel Prude was having a mental breakdown. This is Rochester. And his brother called the police to come and help out. When the police arrived, Daniel Prude was naked. This was in March, so you know it was cold. It was snowy. You had snowy flakes from the video. Anyway, I'm not going to be showing the video here, but you can check the video online. I'll post a link to the video. YouTube has community guidelines. So anyway, you can check the video and see for yourself. It was snowing, it was cold, and it was in March, like I said. Again, this was around the time where the pandemic lockdown started. So, and when the police officers came, what surprised me was one of the officers brought out his taser and he immediately pointed the taser at Daniel Prude. He was naked, he had on nothing on him, and it was cold outside. If the officers had common sense or some humanity, something should have just rang a bell. Ding, 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 ding. Something is wrong with this guy. Maybe he has mental illness. The officers were dressed in cold gear. They were freezing, and somebody is naked in the snow in upstate New York where it's cold, freezing, snowflakes, wet. That is not normal. Anyway, the officer pointed the taser at him. They ordered him to get on the ground. He complied. They said, put your hands behind your back. He complies. No issues. They handcuffed him. I think Daniel Prude started saying something like, in Jesus Christ, I pray, amen. And he asked for the officers' guns. I think he also said, let me get my money and jump on a flight. I think the big issue with the case was that Daniel Prude told the officers that he had coronavirus and he spits in the direction of the officers. Again, if I were a reasonable officer or a reasonable officer at the scene, the officer should have known that something is not right. He probably needs help. Call the doctors, call the medics, let them come and handle this guy because he was already handcuffed. He posed no threat to the officers. So the officers put a spit sock on his face. That doesn't end there. There's more. After they put a spit sock on his face, it appears he tries to get up. You had maybe multiple officers, about 3 officers or so. They could have easily held him by his shoulder till the medics got there or whatever. No, what did they do? They put him face down to the ground. One of the officers pushed his face or his against the ground from the back of his neck, applied a lot of pressure. Another officer put his knee on his back. I think someone else pushed him. They were compressing his back, his face on the neck. He could not breathe. I think one of the officers now said he feels pretty cold. They push him to the ground, his face against the ground, his back, knee on his back against the ground until he stops responding. I'm like, you push somebody's back and face against the ground till he stops responding? It appears the medics came. He was taken to the hospital. Obviously, he was put on life support. And he died 7 days later. The medical examiner ruled his death as a homicide caused by complications of asphyxia in the setting of a physical restraint. This is exactly consistent with the video. Asphyxia is just a fancy word for saying somebody got choked, the air out of their body, suffocation, died as a result of no air. Because they pushed his face against the ground, pushed his back, put their knee on his back. He had no air. He died. The medical examiner also said that excited delirium and acute intoxication by PCP, it's a drug, were contributing factors. Again, the primary cause of death was asphyxia within the setting of a physical restraint. Contributing factors just means this added to it. Contributing, but that was not the primary cause of death. Again, asphyxia, he was deprived of oxygen. That is why he died. But anyway, to keep going, the officers now responded the police investigators, investigated the matter, and they cleared the officers of wrongdoing. They found nothing wrong with what the officers did. And it's like, seriously? And it appears the police chief also told the mayor that Daniel Prude died because of drug overdose. Now the issue is, now, if you're an officer and you respond and you see someone naked, you probably know that person has some kind of mental illness. You should know that. In that situation, this man complied. He was not a threat. His hands was on his back. You had a spit suck over his head. The purpose of the spit suck over his head is to prevent him from spitting, so the threat of him spitting on the officers was gone. So why do you have the spit suck over his head if you're still going to push his head against the ground? The spit suck will do what it's supposed to do, so there's no reason to keep pushing his face against the ground and suffocating the guy and putting your knee on his back when he was already handcuffed. He was cold, he was naked. It wasn't like they have a gun on him. And you know that if the officers were using their sense, common sense, or humanity, I think there was no humanity here. They didn't see him as a person. They should have known that he has mental illness. That is common sense. And and this whole cover up by the police chief when he said that he died of a drug overdose was not right. And that is why sometimes people have a hard time of trusting the police. And the mayor, I think, is pissed because the mayor said that she felt misled. And if you watch the same video that I watched, that all of you guys have watched, you know that the officers engaged in wrongdoing. This was clearly excessive force. There was no need for all that compression of his head against the ground and putting a knee on his back when he was already handcuffed. This is clearly a broken system here where the officers are cleared of wrongdoing. They were investigated by the other police officers, fellow police officers. This is like big brother investigating little brother, your buddy investigating each other, and you saying that it's not a broken system. What happened to having an independent review board, a citizen review board, to look at these cases and determine whether there was police misconduct or excessive force? That's how it's supposed to be. And now you see a lot of folks on the right-wing media, especially a lot of YouTubers, saying that, oh, he would have been alive if he didn't do drugs or spit on the police. Seriously? Is doing drugs now or spitting on police officers license for the police officers to be the judge and the jury and execute at the scene? What happened to the presumption of innocence? These are constitutional rights, due process rights, Sixth Amendment rights, Fourth Amendment rights. These are rights that he has for someone that was naked, handcuffed, and posed no threat, and yet he still died at the hands of the police. It's like, damned if you do and damned if you don't. This guy complied, did nothing wrong, and he still died just because he may have mental illness. And you still have some folks in the right-wing media saying that the people in Rochester were so quick to protest without waiting for an investigation. This is a ridiculous argument. The police had already investigated this matter and cleared the officers of wrongdoing. They had already lied to the mayor that that Daniel Prude died because of a drug overdose. We're in September. This stuff happened in March. Do you need 6 months to keep investigating something that's already done and the officers have been cleared? Clearly, if there was no outcry or protest, this would not be in the news, and this case would not have been reopened for them to hold the officers accountable. It appears the mayor now has suspended the officers, and I keep wondering, why does it have to take a media outcry, protest, people crying, just for the families of these victims to get justice? And you keep blaming people for protesting, when if they don't protest, it appears there's no justice, just like the George Floyd situation. Like, this case is similar to the George Floyd situation because George Floyd pretty much was suffocated to death. And are you now saying that this guy deserves to die just because he may have PCP in his system and he had mental health? That doesn't make sense. The reason you call the police is to protect and serve and save life, not to take life, especially when there was no threat to the officers. An unarmed, naked person who had mental illness, who complied, who was in handcuffs, still died at the hands of police officers. If this doesn't outrage you, then you need to check your soul and your spirit and your humanity. If this should outrage anyone that has some kind of humanity, this is not supposed to happen. It's not supposed to happen. This guy got suffocated just like the George Floyd situation. He was in handcuffs, he complied, and he was even naked. It's like, okay, officers are so used to saying that this person was a threat. This person, the officer feared for his life. In this case, what are the officers going to say? Were they scared for their life? Or because he was spitting at them? Oh, now the officers are scared for their life. If you're scared for your life because someone's about to spit at you and you already have a spit sock or spit bag on their face, maybe you need to find another profession. And I'm so upset that a lot of talking hosts or all this right-wing media folks are not categorically condemning this type of killing. They're blaming drugs, even though the medical examiner has said that he died due to asphyxia, that the drugs were only a contributing factor. They're going to focus on the drugs as if he died because of drugs. He was fine. He was alive when they got there. He died in their hands. So somebody should not have to die just because they have a mental illness or they use drugs. It's always something. It's either, and if sometimes, if there's nothing wrong, they will go into his history. Maybe he did something 15 years ago that has no relevance to the case. They will say, oh, he shoplifted at Walmart 15 years ago. They're going to find something. Just like the George Floyd situation. They said, oh, he did a crime back 10, 15, 20 years ago that had nothing to do with this case. As if he's not entitled to the presumption of innocence. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you think that this officers engaged in misconduct? Do you think this was justified? Let me know in your comment. If you like this video and you want to say no to extreme foolishness, please subscribe, like it, and share this video. Also, don't forget to hit the bell so that way you can get more information as I upload your videos. Anyway, this is Aiken's Doherty here, Mr. Make and Pay. Remember, say no to extreme foolishness.